Quinton Kade hadn't laughed in months real, from the gut laughter, but when the grocery bag split at his feet and a pineapple rolled straight into a stranger's heels, he barked out the loudest laugh he'd had since his wife died 3 years ago. Sorry. It's got a mind of its own, he said, chasing the runaway fruit at the edge of the parking lot as his 5-year-old son, Blake, clutched his hand and giggled uncontrollably. The woman turned, rubbing her ankle, but she was smiling. That pineapple's got attitude, she said, bending to hand him a bruised apple that had joined the escape. Quinton took it, still catching his breath. Thanks, I swear these bags are thinner every week. She crouched beside Blake. You okay, little man? Blake nodded. My dad's bad at carrying stuff, Quinton chuckled. Betrayed by my own flesh and blood, the woman grinned, eyes bright. I'm Gia and you are, Quinton, he said, offering a hand. And this is Blake, my very honest son. Gia shook his hand, firm but warm. Nice to meet you both. Need help carrying the rest? No, I've got it. He tried scooping the rest of the fallen groceries into a single bag, but the bottom gave out with a soft tear, spilling everything again. Blake sighed dramatically. Gia laughed. Let me grab you a real bag from my car. Wait here. Before he could protest, she was already walking to a sleek black SUV parked a few rows away. It practically sparkled. A driver stepped out to open the trunk, and for a moment Quinton froze. A driver, she returned a minute later with a sturdy, reusable bag and handed it over. This one won't betray you. He hesitated, glancing toward the SUV. You sure? That looks like a fancy ride for grocery runs. She shrugged. I like nice things, doesn't mean I don't get groceries like everyone else. Quinton loaded everything into the new bag, then looked at her again. Her jeans were designer, he was pretty sure, and her sunglasses looked like they cost more than his rent. But she was grounded, casual, laughing at bruised fruit and pineapple attacks. Thanks for the save, he said as Blake tugged his sleeve. And sorry about the ambush, Gia smiled, looking at Blake. It was the best laugh I've had in weeks. Quinton tilted his head. Really? You seem like someone who laughs a lot. You'd be surprised, she said softly, then added with a wink, but I'm working on it. The air between them shifted light but charged. Quinton wasn't used to that anymore, not since losing his wife. Not since becoming a full-time single dad who worked 2 jobs and barely slept. Gia checked her watch. I should go, but do you come here often? He raised an eyebrow. That a pickup line, she laughed again. I meant the store, I'm not that smooth. Blake piped up, we come every Saturday. Same time, Gia looked at Quinton, eyebrows raised. He cleared his throat. Yeah, we do. Well, she said, stepping back toward her car, maybe I'll run into you again, preferably without fruit violence. And then she was gone, the SUV pulling away with a quiet hum. Quinton drove home with Blake humming in the backseat, that weird lightness still in his chest. He couldn't remember the last time a woman looked at him like that, like he was more than a tired dad with bags under his eyes and a rusty car. The next Saturday, she was there. Gia stood near the oranges, pretending to inspect one, but her eyes lit up the moment she saw them. Back for round 2, she asked. Quinton smiled. No pineapples this time, we're keeping it safe. Blake ran up and handed her a small chocolate from the kids' aisle. For you, she knelt down. Thank you, Blake, that's so sweet, he shrugged. You were nice to my dad. Quinton felt his ears heat. He's got no filter, sorry, I like it, she said, standing. Honesty's rare. They walked through the store together. It felt easy, like they'd known each other longer than a week. Gia pushed the cart while Blake told her about his favorite cartoons. She listened like she cared, laughing at his jokes and asking questions. Quinton watched them, something stirring inside him he hadn't let himself feel in years. At checkout, Gia reached for her wallet. Oh no, Quinton said quickly. You're not paying for our groceries, she laughed. I wasn't going to, just grabbing gum, he exhaled. Sorry, I'm not used to this kindness, he said. From someone like you, she tilted her head. What does that mean? Well, I saw your car last week. You've got money, a driver. My car barely starts some mornings. Gia took a breath, then smiled softly. I like real people, you and Blake. You're very real. That night, as Blake slept and Quinton microwaved leftover pasta, he stared at the ceiling, wondering what the hell he was doing. He hadn't dated in years. He barely had time to shower, let alone impress a woman like Gia, and yet the next Saturday she was there again. This time she invited them to get ice cream after. They sat at a small outdoor table, Gia and Quinton sharing a sundae while Blake devoured a cone with sprinkles. "I don't date," he blurted suddenly. Gia blinked. "Okay, I mean I haven't. Since Blake's mom passed, it's been hard." "I get it," she said gently. "You're protecting him and yourself," he nodded. "But you're allowed to be happy," she added. He looked at her, really looked. "And what about you? What's your story?" Gia hesitated, then smiled. "I'm not who people think I am. I run a company. I have a lot of money. Most men treat me like a trophy or a challenge." Quinton frowned. "That sucks." "Yeah, that's why I didn't tell you right away." He leaned forward. "You don't have to be anyone else around us. Blake doesn't care if you have a jet or a bike, and honestly, neither do I." Her eyes softened. "That's why I like being around you," he smiled. "Good, because I kinda like being around you too." Gia reached across the table and squeezed his hand, and for the first time in years, Quinton didn't feel like he was just surviving. He felt like he was starting to live again. With her, Gia stood at the edge of the playground, her arms crossed loosely as she watched Blake hang upside down from the monkey bars, his laughter echoing through the park. Quinton sat near her on the bench, one leg crossed over the other, a coffee cup between his palms. The wind tugged at the hem of his sweater, and his eyes followed his son's every move with quiet alertness. "He's fearless," Gia said, her gaze still on Blake. Quinton nodded. "He gets that from his mom. I was the kid who sat in the sandbox and built stuff, not climbed things like a maniac." Gia glanced at him. "You still build stuff, woodworking. Mostly at night when Blake's asleep. Helps clear my head. Some pieces actually sell on commission." Her eyebrows lifted. "You sell what you make," he shrugged. "A few coffee tables, a bookshelf or two. It's not a business or anything, just something that keeps the lights on when the second job dries up." She turned toward him more fully. "Why haven't you turned it into a full-time thing?" Quinton gave a quiet laugh. "Because full-time things need full-time money and marketing, and time I don't have." Gia looked back at Blake, thoughtful. "You ever think about what you'd do if you didn't have to worry about money?" He paused, then tilted his head. "You mean like if I won the lottery?" "I mean if you were just free to choose, no pressure, no survival mode." "I'd build," he said. "A real workshop, maybe teach Blake how to use tools when he's older, create things that last." She smiled at that, but said nothing. Blake dropped from the bars and ran toward them, his cheeks flushed. "I'm thirsty." "I have water in the bag," Quinton said, reaching for it. Gia beat him to it, pulling out a small steel bottle and handing it over. "Filtered lemon infused. Only the best for playground warriors." Blake took a long drink, then grinned. "That's fancy." Gia grinned back. "So are you." Once Blake returned to the jungle gym, Quinton leaned in slightly. "You always carry lemon water around. It's habit. I used to get migraines from dehydration during board meetings. Now I overcompensate." His brow furrowed. "Board meetings," she hesitated. "I'm on the board of my company. Actually, I run it. I started it right after college. Tech development and user interface design." Quinton blinked. "Wait, you founded it." "Co-founded, technically, but my partner bailed after the first year, said it was too risky. I bought him out and built it from there." "That's impressive." Gia looked away. "It's not something I talk about often. Not because I'm ashamed of it, but because people usually stop seeing me after that. They see the company, the title, the money. I see someone who offered my kid water and remembered he liked sprinkles on his ice cream," Quinton said. She turned her head slowly to face him again. "That's rare, you know. I'm starting to think you are too." That evening, Quinton stood in the garage behind his duplex, smoothing the edge of a plank with slow, practiced movements. Blake sat on a stool nearby, sketching something on a scrap of paper. "Is that another spaceship?" Quinton asked. "It's a flying table with rockets. Bold design choice." Blake held it up. "Can we build it? Maybe someday." There was a knock at the garage door. Quinton wiped his hands on a rag as he opened it. Gia stood there holding 2 takeout bags. "I brought dinner." "Hope you're not allergic to Thai." He stepped aside, surprised. "I wasn't expecting you tonight." "I figured that out when I saw your face," she said with a grin. "But I wanted to see your workshop." Blake ran to her. "Did you bring those mango things again? Sticky rice and mango, of course." "You think I'd show up without dessert?" They gathered around the small workbench, eating off mismatched plates. Gia asked questions about the different tools, and Quinton explained each one, his voice warmer than usual. Blake showed her his drawing, and she told him it looked like something NASA should have on file. After Blake went to bed, Gia lingered in the garage, watching Quinton sand down another board. "You're different here," she said softly. He looked up. "What do you mean, calmer?" "Like you're not carrying the weight of the world. This place is the only part of my life I still feel like I control. You're good at it, really good. I don't have a degree or anything, just taught myself. You don't need a degree to be brilliant." He set the board down. "Why are you really here tonight?" She hesitated, then walked over and leaned against the table. "I wanted to see where you go when the world gets heavy." He studied her. "You could have gone anywhere, a gala, a yacht party, dinner with some senator. I wanted to be here." "With you," he stepped closer, eyes searching hers. "Gia, I don't know what this is, but I haven't felt like someone saw me, really saw me, in a long time." She reached up, brushing a strand of hair behind his ear. "Then let me keep seeing you." He leaned in, his hands still dusted with sawdust, and kissed her softly. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "Don't pull away from this." "I'm scared," he admitted. "I am too." As she left that night, Quinton stood on the front step, watching as a sleek silver car picked her up at the corner. He didn't ask about the driver or the make of the vehicle. He didn't need to. He knew now. She was wealthy, monumentally so. But she had shown up at his garage with takeout, sat on a stool with his son, and kissed him with the kind of honesty that didn't care about bank statements or stock portfolios. He walked back inside, heart pounding with something he hadn't felt in years possibility. Quinton's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter late Thursday afternoon, just as he was loading dishes into the sink. His hands were wet, sleeves rolled up past his elbows, and Blake sat at the dining table, coloring a poster for school. "Dad," Blake called. "Your phone's dancing." Quinton dried his hands on a dish towel and picked it up. Unknown number, he answered cautiously. "Hello, Quinton," Gia's voice low and quick. "I need a favor. Can you pick me up?" He straightened, immediately alert. "Where are you?" "Corner of Franklin and Westmore." "I left a meeting early. My driver's gone. I'll explain when I see you. I'll be there in 15. He hung up, heart thudding. "Hey, Blake, get your sneakers. We're going for a quick drive." The boy grinned. "Ice cream. Rescue mission," Quinton said, grabbing his keys. Gia stood beneath a street lamp when they arrived, her coat wrapped tightly around her, hair pulled into a loose knot. She didn't look like herself, at least, not the version he'd seen at the park or the garage. Her eyes were shadowed, her jaw tight. Quinton rolled down the window. "Hop in." She climbed into the front seat without a word. Blake waved from the back. "Hi, Gia." "Hey, buddy," she said, voice softer. "Thanks for coming, both of you." Quinton pulled back onto the road. "What happened?" She hesitated, glancing out the window. "My board forced a vote today. They tried to remove me as CEO. Said I was too emotionally invested in a new project, too distracted." He kept his eyes on the road but tightened his grip on the wheel. "Distracted by what? You?" He didn't respond for a moment. "They're not wrong," she added, "but they're not right either. I've run that company since I was 22. I made it what it is, and suddenly they think I'm a liability. And they tried to vote you out. They failed, but barely. It was close. I walked out before the meeting ended." Quinton pulled into his driveway. The porch light flickered on automatically. "You're staying here tonight." She looked at him, startled. You need a place where no one's watching your every move. No assistants, no board members, no press, just us." Gia turned to Blake. "You okay with me crashing your place?" He gave a dramatic thumbs up. "As long as we get pancakes tomorrow," she laughed, the sound quieter than usual. "Deal." Later, after Blake had fallen asleep in his room, Quinton found Gia in the kitchen, staring at a mug of tea she hadn't touched. "You ever think about walking away from it?" he asked. She didn't look up. "All the time. But then I remember what I built, what it meant. And now I'm not sure if I own the company or if it owns me." He leaned against the counter beside her. "You know, I used to think money solved everything, but the more I get to know you, the more I realize it just changes the problems." She looked at him then. "You think we're too different. I think we're different in all the right ways." She exhaled slowly. "I'm scared I'll lose everything. And not just the company." "You won't lose me," he said. Gia reached for his hand. "That's what I'm holding on to. They didn't speak again for a while. The kitchen was quiet except for the faint hum of the fridge and the wind brushing the windows. The next morning, Quinton woke to the smell of something sweet. He stepped into the kitchen to find Gia at the stove, hair down, wearing one of his flannel shirts over leggings, flipping pancakes with surprising focus. Blake sat at the table wearing a syrup mustache. "You made him breakfast?" Quinton asked. Gia turned, spatula in hand. "I promised pancakes, remember?" Blake nodded. "She made the shape of a dinosaur." Quinton crossed the room and kissed her cheek. "You're full of surprises." She leaned into him briefly. "You're not so bad yourself." After breakfast, Gia pulled Quinton aside near the laundry nook, away from Blake's eager chatter. "I have to fly to San Diego this weekend. There's a summit. I can't skip it." He nodded. "Of course. I want you and Blake to come with me." He paused. "What? I'll cover everything. Flights, hotel, meals. You can bring your tools if you want to work on anything. There's a kids program at the resort. Blake'll love it." "Gia, I'm not trying to impress you. I want you close. And I want you to see the part of my world I don't show anyone." He searched her face. "You sure?" "I'm done hiding. From the board. From people who think I should be alone from you." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Let me talk to my boss. If I can get Friday off, we'll come." Gia's face lit up not with excitement, but with something gentler. Relief. That Friday they boarded a private jet. Blake's eyes nearly popped out of his head at the sight of the leather seats and the basket of snacks waiting for them. Gia sat beside them, watching with amusement as Blake gave a delighted monologue about how the bathroom was fancy like a spaceship. Quinton didn't ask how much the flight cost. He didn't want to know. For once, he let himself just be next to her, holding her hand during takeoff, sharing headphones while Blake slept between them. The resort was perched on a cliff overlooking the ocean, all sleek lines and warm stone, palm trees swaying in the breeze. Their suite had 2 bedrooms and a balcony bigger than Quinton's entire living room. That night, Gia led him to the edge of the terrace, where the sky stretched out in a deep velvet blue, stars scattered above them. "I know how this looks," she said, voice low. "But this isn't about money." He stepped closer. "I know. It's about wanting a life that feels like this, like peace. Like the way you made me feel when I was standing in a grocery store with pineapple juice on my shoes." He laughed quietly. "I think about that day a lot." She turned toward him. "I've had everything, but I never had someone who looked at me the way you do." He touched her face, brushing his thumb over her cheekbone. "And I never thought I'd laugh again, not like that. Not with someone like you." Gia leaned in and kissed him, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that carried promises. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "I'm falling in love with you, Quinton." He didn't hesitate. "Then fall." "I'm right here." Gia stood backstage in a tailored black sheath dress, her heels quiet against the polished floor as she waited for her name to be called. Beyond the curtain, the summit's keynote speaker was wrapping up. Her posture was composed, but her hands were clenched around the cue cards she hadn't looked at once. She hadn't planned on speaking. The board had insisted. She was the face of the company again publicly, at least after surviving the vote. But her mind wasn't on market predictions or platform expansions. It was still in the hotel room down the hill, where Blake had insisted on making her a good luck paper crown from a room service menu. Quinton had helped him cut it out. "Gia Waverly, ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice rang out. She stepped into the spotlight, blinking briefly at the brightness. The applause swelled, but it felt distant. She didn't move to the podium. Instead, she walked to the edge of the stage, her voice unamplified at first, quiet but sure. "I was told to talk about innovation, about future tech, but I can't stand here tonight and pretend that's what's on my mind." The room hushed. "I spent years building this company from nothing. I measured success by numbers, by scale, by how many people knew my name. But lately, success has started to look different." She took a breath. "It looks like pancakes in the morning, like a little boy handing me a chocolate from the kids' aisle because I was kind. It looks like someone seeing me, not my title, and it's made me realize that I've been chasing the wrong thing." The silence in the ballroom was absolute. "I'm not stepping down," she continued, her voice stronger now, "but I am changing the way I lead. I'm investing in people, not just platforms. And if that makes me less of a CEO in some eyes, so be it. She stepped back from the edge, nodding once. "Thank you." The applause was thunderous. Quinton watched the live stream from the hotel room, Blake curled against his side, half asleep. When Gia returned an hour later, her heels in hand and her hair loose around her shoulders, he opened the door before she could knock. "I saw it," he said. She stepped over the threshold, setting her shoes down gently. "I meant every word." Blake stirred on the couch and sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Did they give you a trophy?" She laughed softly. "No trophy, but I think I won something better." Quinton pulled her into his arms, pressing his forehead to hers. "You sure you're ready for all of it, this life?" "The mess, the noise, the kid who talks through movies. I want all of it," she said without hesitation. "I want you, both of you." Back in the city a week later, Gia invited Quinton and Blake to dinner not at a restaurant, but at her penthouse. He hesitated at the entryway, Blake's hand in his. The marble floors gleamed, and the air smelled faintly of jasmine and citrus. A chef moved through the open kitchen, stirring something in a copper pot. Gia emerged barefoot, in jeans and a soft navy sweater. "Shoes off, please, house rule." Blake dropped his sneakers immediately. "This place is huge. Is there a trampoline?" "No," she said, guiding them in. "But there's a theater room and a rooftop garden with koi fish." Quinton leaned closer. "You've been holding out on us." She grinned. "I wanted you to see this part of my life when I was sure it wouldn't scare you off." "It doesn't," he said. "It just makes me want to work harder. You don't have to impress me, Quinton. I'm not trying to impress you. I'm trying to keep up with you." After dinner, grilled sea bass, roasted vegetables, and a lemon tart, Blake declared, too fancy to eat but ate anyway. Gia led them up a glass staircase to the rooftop garden. The city stretched before them in a sea of lights. Wind moved through the trees planted along the edge, and water trickled through a low stone fountain. Blake ran to the koi pond, whispering to the fish as if they understood him. Quinton stood beside Gia at the railing. "I used to think people like you lived in a different world." "We do," she said quietly. "But it doesn't mean we want to stay there." He turned to her. "What do you want now, you in my world, or me in yours, doesn't matter where. Just as long as it's together." He took a small velvet box from his pocket. Gia stared at it still. "It's not a diamond," he said, opening it. Inside was a band made of warm, toned wood, polished smooth, carved with a delicate wave pattern. "I made it in the garage. I wanted you to have something I could give with my own hands." Her fingers trembled as she took it. "You made this. I don't have a jet or a driver. I can't fly you to Paris for a weekend, but I can love you every single day with everything I've got." She looked up at him, eyes glistening. "That's worth more than anything I've ever bought. I want to marry you, Gia, but not just because I love you, because I trust you. With me, with Blake." She reached up, cupped his face. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." Blake turned from the pond. "Did you just propose?" Quinton nodded. She said yes. Blake threw his arms in the air. "Can I be the ring bearer? You can be the best man," Gia said, sweeping him into a hug. The wedding was small, held in Gia's garden with only close friends and a few family members. Blake wore a tiny navy suit and carried the wooden ring with solemn pride. Gia walked barefoot down the stone path, her dress simple, elegant, her smile brighter than the sun above. Quinton waited under the arch he'd built himself, carved with their initials and tiny stars Blake insisted on adding. When she reached him, he whispered, "You're the most impossible thing that ever happened to me." She touched his hand. "And you're the most beautiful surprise." They exchanged vows under the open sky, promising not perfect lives but real ones, messy, full of laughter and stitched with love. Later that night, after the guests were gone and Blake had fallen asleep curled on a couch with frosting on his cheek, Gia and Quinton stood together on the rooftop, the city glittering around them. "I used to think I had everything," she said, leaning into him. "But I didn't have this." He wrapped his arms around her. "We have it now." And they did. A life built not on wealth, but on laughter, second chances, and the quiet magic of being truly seen. Blake tugged at the corner of Gia's long white cardigan, his voice urgent as he whispered up to her. "Can I tell them now?" Gia glanced toward the garden, where her parents stood beside Quinton, sipping from delicate glasses and laughing at something he'd just said. The golden light of late afternoon poured over the backyard, catching the soft flutter of string lights above. She crouched beside Blake, tucking a curl behind his ear. I think now's perfect. He nodded seriously, then broke into a sprint across the grass, waving his arms. Everyone, everyone. We have something to say. The small crowd hushed, turning toward the boy as he scrambled up the low stone steps of the patio. Gia followed, her hand slipping into Quinton's the moment she reached his side. Blake cleared his throat dramatically. Hi, I'm Blake, you probably already know that. But I have an announcement. Quinton leaned in and whispered, You practiced this, didn't you? Blake whispered back, I wrote it down, it's in my sock. Gia clamped a hand over her mouth to stifle a laugh. Blake straightened. Today's not just a party. It's not just because we had a wedding a few weeks ago and now we live in the big house with the fish. He paused. It's because we're a family now, like for real, forever, and that's a big deal. Applause broke out and Gia pulled him into a hug as the guests cheered. Quinton kissed the top of Blake's head. You nailed it, champ, Blake beamed. I didn't even need my sock notes. The party continued into the evening, with close friends and family gathered throughout the garden, music playing softly under the rustle of trees. Quinton moved through the crowd with an ease he hadn't known. He was capable of a few months ago, laughing with Gia's longtime assistant, helping an elderly neighbor to a seat, remembering small details about everyone he spoke to. No longer the man who'd hovered at the edge of every event, unsure of where he belonged. Here he belonged. Gia stood near the fountain watching him. Her mother sidled up beside her, a glass of champagne in hand. He's a good one, her mother said. He's more than that, Gia replied. He's home. Her mother slid a knowing glance her way. You've always been the fire. It's nice to see you find someone who doesn't try to put it out, just holds it. Gia reached for her hand. He holds all of it. Even the parts I didn't realize I'd buried. They stood together for a moment, until Gia's father called out that dessert had arrived. The cake, a towering creation of white chocolate and lavender cream, had been Blake's design request. I want it to taste like a cloud, he'd said during the tasting. And somehow, the baker had delivered. Later, after the guests had gone and the last of the lanterns had been extinguished, Gia and Quinton sat barefoot at the edge of the koi pond, their legs dangling over the warm stone ledge. Blake had fallen asleep upstairs, tucked between them during a bedtime story, one of Quinton's own from a worn notebook. The last time I sat still this long, I was in the hospital waiting room, Quinton said. Gia turned her head. What happened? Blake had pneumonia. He was just 2. I sat for 12 hours straight, afraid to move in case they needed me. I remember thinking, this is it. This is my whole world now, just waiting for the next thing to go wrong. She touched his hand gently. And now, he looked at her, eyes steady. Now I'm not waiting anymore. I'm building. Gia leaned her head on his shoulder. Do you still make things in the garage? Every night. I finished something last week, actually, wanted to show you. He stood, disappearing into the house for a moment, then returned with a long, narrow box. He handed it to her and sat back down. She opened it slowly. Inside was a carved wooden map, not of the world, but of their garden. Each corner etched with delicate precision. The koi pond, the swing Blake loved, the stone path where they'd exchanged vows. In the center, a small heart embedded with a pearl from her mother's jewelry box. I made this for our front hall, he said. So even when we're out, we remember where we return to. Gia traced the lines with her fingertips. It's perfect. I want to keep creating pieces of this life. With you. With Blake, I never thought I'd get a second chance, but I did. And I'm not wasting it. She kissed him then, slow and sure, the kind of kiss that didn't need to ask for anything because everything had already been given. The next morning, Gia found Blake in the garden, crouched beside the pond. What you doing? She asked. Thinking about names, he said without turning. For the fish, for the baby. Gia blinked. What baby? He looked up at her, grinning. I heard you and Dad last night. You were talking about maybe having one, she laughed. You were supposed to be asleep, he shrugged. I was, then I wasn't, she sat beside him. We don't know anything yet, but if that ever happens, you'd be the best big brother. I know, he said solemnly. That's why I'm picking names now, for practice. Gia ruffled his hair. Let me know what you come up with. Inside, Quinton was already in the garage working on a new piece, a crib. He hadn't told Gia yet. He wasn't even sure it would be needed, but the act of building it felt like a promise. Not just of a future child, but of belief in a future period. As seasons passed, The house filled with warmth, with projects and spilled juice and movie nights on the couch. Quinton's woodworking blossomed into a full business, orders coming in from all over the state. Gia stepped back from her company's day-to-day, choosing instead to mentor young female founders, helping them build something of their own without losing themselves in the process. Their life wasn't perfect. Some nights were sleepless, some days were loud, but it was full and it was theirs. And one sunny spring morning, Gia stood on the back deck barefoot, a mug in one hand and a soft swell at her belly. Quinton joined her, brushing a kiss to her temple. "Boy or girl?" she asked. "Doesn't matter," he said. "They'll have the best mom in the world, and the most patient dad. And the loudest big brother," he added, just as Blake shouted from inside about a missing science project. They both laughed. "I used to think love would feel like fire," Gia said. "But this feels like earth. Like something I can grow from." Quinton turned her toward him, resting a hand over hers on her stomach. "Then let's keep growing," he said, and they did, together, always.